So let's do one of these again. Okay, so it's time for another Superfluous review. This is No Quarter Prime, issue number 3. It kind of came out a while ago now, but I finally got around to it, so let's talk a little bit about it. So the issue starts off with volume 3 of the Escalation to War series. That is all of the history from like 604 AR through 605 AR to kind of give you a sense of where the world is right now, where Western Immoren is. This particular conflict heavily revolves around Khador's takeover of Lael, and in particular, this issue focuses on the siege of Merowyn, which happens to be where the Order of the Golden Crucible is. Now, that's important because Order of the Golden Crucible is going to be a new faction released this year. So basically, they were a faction of arcanists and alchemists based in Merowyn within Lael, and when Khador had come in and taken over Merowyn, they were trying to gain access to all that technology, but basically the Order of the Golden Crucible then moved over to Ord from there. Khador was able to take some of that technology, however. This is how we have assault commandos. And one of the big questions surrounding the takeover specifically of Merowyn inside Lael was how Khador was able to do it with so little bloodshed and so little destruction. And so the article explains a little more of the treachery and secret meetings and kind of the preparation work that went into taking over and attacking Lael well before the armies ever marched on it. You know, political intrigue, woo. It includes a map for the final siege of Merowyn. You see along the Black River here, this is all of Lael encompassed, and all these red areas here are where the different armies have been stationed to siege the area. I probably sat and stared at this for like half an hour. This issue includes 3 new Company of Iron scenarios and some addition to the core rules. There's actually a scenario for multiplayer now. If you're playing 3 to 4 players, you are now playing on a 4x4 board, so all of your 4x4 maps are actually useful again for Company of Iron. Plus you have the added multiplayer mode to add some chaos as well. So the first scenario is fairly basic. It's called Wells of Power. It's a 4-player game where you deploy on each corner of the map. There's a flag in the middle, and there's an objective marker between your centerline deployment at the corner and the flag. So in there's this magical objective that allows you to draw extra cards. And then you're just really kind of fighting over the flag and points. The second scenario, Something Wicked, is a lot of fun. It's similar to a prior regular game scenario they had allowed, where you have this monster on the game board, and it will appear out of the forest on a roll of a specific target number, and that monster just runs around wrecking everybody's face because it's protecting the flag that you're trying to score on. I'm actually looking forward to trying that one just because it's more chaotic and there's this other element of fighting the game. And the last scenario, Sins of the Past, is a 4-player game where you sort of stumble upon these ruins, and it feels a little bit more RPG-like because there's different objective markers along the board, like 1 through 8, and each of them are can be a different type of objective. So you could have like a body bag objective and suddenly you're collecting the corpses of whoever you kill, or you run into a trap door and there's a trapperkin underneath it. So it just adds a lot more variety, which I think was fun, and it again is a way of fighting against the game in addition to against your opponent. The Company of Iron rule set was also updated to allow you to include Warcaster and Warlock attachments into your games, and so they would attach to whoever your commander is. So there's also an article that gives you a 50-point scenario for normal War Machine and Hordes, where you actually can build this 9-stone terrain piece. It's a magical entity that affects the game. And so there's this scenario in which you're fighting over control of it, and you can draw on magic from that piece of terrain to help fight the enemy or give you bonuses. And I find it interesting because it's a little bit more of a story-driven way of playing the game. You're fighting over a specific objective that has a font of power, that has a reason to be there. Now, Privateer's been doing this lately in their magazines. They keep coming up with new mini games to play, and I'm not sure what it is they're trying to feel out, because I don't know that anybody really plays them. But this one's called Iron Sights, and it's a sniping game. So you play against another opponent, and you have 3 models. One of them is your real sniper, and the other 2 are echoes. And so you're trying to trick the opponent into not shooting your real sniper while simultaneously trying to shoot their real sniper. And they seem to be playing a little bit with the terrain rules in this. Different things block line of sight than normal. And you no longer have front arcs, or you don't deal with front arcs and back arcs for the purpose of this particular game. You just have a 360 vision. And the whole rest of the magazine is basically all surrounding the Blindwater Congregation. So most of you have probably already seen the CID for that. A bunch of changes that were made to the Crocodile and Barnabas and whatnot. The article for Forces of Minions, the Blindwater Congregation, gives you an entire backstory on who they are, where the Blindwater Congregation came from, how integral Bloody Barnabas has been to the coming together of all of those tribes under the Blindwater Congregation, talks about their culture, talks about how they live and the type of structures they build and how they fight. And it's a very, very harsh world to live in. Like, Gator life is not easy. Also, cannibalism. So essentially you have all of these marshlands in which these different tribes of gator men lived. They were bog trogs and also croaks, who are actually escaped slaves from the Scorn Empire. They're not even from those marshes, but they sort of ended up inhabiting and migrating over there because of them escaping Scorn. And then, of course, a huge part of the story is around Barnabas, who is just completely believes that he's a god. Turns out he was right. And he brings all of the Blindwater Congregation together as this huge army to eventually march upon the rest of Emerald. I mean, his end goal is to just conquer the world after he's been, completely elevated to full godhood. And of course, they have a lot of innate magical abilities, specifically revolving around necromantic energies. So they have the ability to trap your soul and twist that into powers befitting them. And it's really helpful if you are playing the IKRPG or the Unleashed version of it, where you can get a better sense of the aesthetic of how these tribes live and if you're going to run into them, what to expect. And then it actually goes into small biographies of each of the major characters, like Bloody Barnabas, like Caliban, like Jaga Jaga, like Rask, like Long Chops, and Malok. And of course, Wrong Eye and Snapjaw, which are interesting. And Privateer's been doing another interesting thing I have noticed for new scenarios for the regular War Machine and Hordes gameplay is they're adding different types of battlefield states. Like, I think it was issue 2, there was an ongoing blizzard that you could play in the game where it was just a battlefield condition and you just sort of always had to deal with it. And then there were different terrain pieces that allowed you to offset against the effect of that blizzard. Well, they're doing that again in this issue where you're fighting in all of this swampland. So one of them is this torrential downpour that's just a battlefield condition where your models can eventually get washed away if you're not careful. And so they're expanding on that by giving different terrain pieces that offer shelter. In this case, there's like a forest that if you're inside, you can gain shelter from the storm and you're not going to get washed away. But, if you're out in the storm, you're going to have limited vision. You're going to not have as good an ability to shoot. So one of the other pieces of terrain is called the Effigy of Slaughter. So it's just a terrain piece that while you're within 5 inches of it, you lose tough and you can't remove damage from yourself. Another one is called a mud marsh. So it's this shallow water terrain, but if you don't have amphibious, then you take -2 defense. Then there's like a sacrificial altar, which is another obstacle piece, and it collects souls if models are killed within a certain radius of it. And if it collects 5 souls, then everybody within, I think, a 6-inch radius of it takes a point of damage. And the really creepy one is the Devil's Rat Nest, which is basically a trench, but if you fall down in it, you take a point of damage because they're rats. They're poisonous rats. And so they give you 3 gameplay scenarios, again, if you're wanting to play more of a lore-based game. So one of them, you're dealing with that torrential downpour while trying to take zones. In another one, you are in a shanty town. There's like this small town that everybody's fighting in, and it's a multiplayer campaign, so you can play up to 4 players in it. And you're fighting for the zone in the middle, but the zone also has these little shanty huts of the local inhabitants who will shoot you because they want you off their lawn. And then the last one is Barnabas, Lord of Blood, has captured you, or a select group of your solos, and you have to fight in this arena. So it's just a free-for-all arena game. So there you go. There is my Superfluous review of No Quarter issue number 3. I am enjoying the new scenarios they're giving. I think that adds a lot of variety, and I definitely encourage people to play those games if they're not trying to specifically practice for Steamroller scenario. It just adds a little more depth to the game, a little more history and why you're there. Western Immoren and the Iron Kingdoms actually has a lot of rich lore to it that I think a lot of people don't realize because you might be busy practicing just the gameplay mechanics for tournaments or whatever. And so these scenarios, I think, really play the game more the way you're supposed to. You're involved in the world. You're playing in the world of the Iron Kingdoms. So I know this one's coming out late, so maybe you've already read No Quarter issue number 3. Let me know what you think of it in the comments. If there was a particular scenario you liked. I know there's painting tutorials in there, but it's not really my strength, so I can't speak too much to it. And if you play Blindwater Congregation, did you like the CID changes? Let me know in the comments. I want to see how you're enjoying playing Gators. Well, that's it for now, guys. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.